Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Stefan, for the invitation. I'm very glad to be with you today, even though I've offered my apologies. I could not be together with you in Vienna today to discuss the ECS. As you've said, I will briefly present some of the results of this very interesting project we've been working on, the MAPE project. And I will do this as a spokesperson for the many persons, notaries, academics, CNUE staff, who have worked together on this project for the last 2 years. Now, before presenting some of the recommendations which we have adopted, and I cannot see what you're seeing on the screen, but I guess you're seeing yes, you're seeing my yes, you're seeing it. It's fine. Before going on to the actual final product, the deliverable of the MAPE project, what I'd like to do with you is very briefly come back on how we went to work. And I know for most of you, or at least for some of you, this will be something, this will be déjà vu, because many of you have actually participated in the MAPE project, for which I want to extend my thanks. This project has been going on for 2 years, has been carried out by CNUE together with 21 national chambers. And the initial ambition was to evaluate the application of the succession regulations, specifically, how is that regulation applied by notaries? You know, and this has been already explained this morning, that the succession regulation itself invites the Commission to evaluate the regulation by 18 August 2025. That is something you find in Article 82. And the ambition with the MAPE project was to give the Commission some food for thought. So how did we go to work? If you look at this, at what you can see on the screen, the MAPE project actually rested on 2 pillars. First, we attempted to collect data. We attempted to collect data on the actual application of the regulation by notaries. We wanted to have quantitative data, but also qualitative data. And I must say, we have to really thank notaries in the 21 member states who have participated in the various surveys, online surveys, but also written surveys, and doing so have provided us with a wealth of information on many aspects of the regulation. I believe it's the first time we have so much data on the actual application of a regulation. That was the first pillar of our project, collecting data. With that data, we identified some of the areas where we believed improvements could be made. And we had discussions on what improvements could we suggest to the Commission. At the end of the project, we settled for 18 recommendations, which have been drafted, and which concern pretty much all aspects of the succession regulation, the scope of application, the rules of jurisdiction, the conflict of law rules, and obviously the ECS. And these recommendations, I'm glad to say that they have been adopted by CNUE at its last General Assembly. Now, for this project, we focused on issues we believed were important. We did not cover all issues which could arise in a cross-border succession. Let me give you one example of something we did not cover, and that is the issue of digital assets. And why did we not cover the issue of digital assets? Because it's rather novel, it's rather new, and we felt that we would not be able to collect data on this. But definitely, the issue of how do you handle digital assets if a person dies is an issue on which the notarial world should work in the future. So what I would like to do with you today is focus on a couple of recommendations and try to explain why we adopted these recommendations, in particular on the ECS. You see now a lot of numbers on your screen. I wanted to start with that because I've told you the first pillar of the project was collecting data. And regarding the ECS, we collected data on the number of ECS which were issued in the various member states. Now, there are a lot of figures here. I think there are two main lessons if you look at this table. The first lesson is that we have a number of gaps. you can see that for some member states, we do not have data. We do not know how many ECS are issued in Austria, Bulgaria, the Czech Republic, the Netherlands, and Romania. That's the first lesson. We do not have a complete picture of, let's say, the ECS activity in all member states. There's a second lesson which I think is more important, and that is that looking at member states for which we have figures, the figures are quite modest. I mean, if you look at the number of ECS issued, in some member states, you're talking about 5 ECS per year, and the highest number is 300 ECS every year. That's quite limited. It's very modest, especially if you compare that to the number of, let's call them national certificates. So one conclusion is that the ECS is the exception. But does that mean that the ECS is a sleeping beauty, as the question here raises? To some extent, yes, the ECS is a sleeping beauty because it has not yet become a tool which is used every day by notaries in all member states. It remains the exceptions, but I think we need to be a little bit more nuanced. First, if you look very closely to the numbers, you will see that there is a positive trend. The numbers of ECS issued increases every year in member states for which we have figures. So that's a positive evolution. We do not have data for 2022, but we can safely assume that numbers have increased again for 2022. Second, and most importantly, I think, we should not forget that the ECS was absolutely not meant to replace the national instruments. It was not meant to replace the Erbschein in Germany, the Einantwortungsbeschluss in Austria, or the Acte de Notoriété, which may be delivered by a French notary. These documents remain part of the toolbox of every notary, and the expectation was that they would not disappear. So I think a more correct question would be, do notaries today deliver the ECS when this is appropriate, taking into account the specific circumstances of a succession? And here we have also some results, because we have had the privilege of receiving answers by more than 60 notaries, which have accepted to share their expertise on the basis of a written survey. And what we've learned from this questionnaire is that the majority of the notaries is quite positive about the ECS and their experience with it. And those experts who are not positive do not reject this ECS, but they simply say that they prefer their national certificates for various reasons. So all in all, I think it's a very nuanced picture. The ECS certainly has not become something which every notary uses or sees every week. This was not the ambition of the succession regulation. The trend is positive, and the key question is, are we certain that notaries have built in their practice this question, do I go for a national certificate? Do I go for the ECS? Now, the MAPE project has also shown that focusing in more details on the ECS, the regulation has not completely delivered on its promises. We have singled out a number of areas where certainly improvements could be made. And for today, I'll be taking 4 examples, which are linked to 4 of the 18 recommendations which were adopted. Let me start immediately with recommendation number 15, which relates to the question of, do we have a register for the ECS? As you all know, the regulation is silent on that issue. The regulation does not say anything on the need or the possibility for a member state to set up a register for the ECS. So the member states here have free hand, and we've seen that some member states have indeed created a register, but other member states have not. And as you look in more details, you will probably know that today the registers for ECS of 3 member states are interconnected thanks to the NRAP platform. France, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands have a register for ECS, and these registers are interconnected. In our recommendation number 15, we ask the EU to go one step further and to think seriously on the desirability to work towards creating a public register for the ECS. Now, why should we do that? Why should we plead for more registers? Well, the MAPE project has revealed many things, but one of the most important items which came to our attention during the MAPE project is that in cross-border successions today in the EU, there are situations, and this is not exceptional, where when a person dies, there will be succession proceedings in 2 member states. And this is something which, as I said, is not exceptional. It occurs more frequently than we anticipated. And this is linked definitely to the position of notaries, which, as you know, is very different in all member states. Their role, Stefan has reminded you that in Austria, but also in other member states, the notary intervenes as a court commissioner. So the notary intervenes ex officio, does not need to be requested by the clients. And some of you may know that there has been a parallel project to the MAPE, the Jubilee project, which has been very interesting because it has allowed us to get a very precise picture of the position of notaries among other in the succession regulation. And this has helped explain the root of this findings that you've got situations where when one person dies, several notaries or a notary and a court would be working on the case in different member states. One solution for this would be indeed having registers where not the whole succession proceedings is included, but the final result, the ECS. You can see that the recommendation is quite modest. It does not call for the creation of a European register. It invites the EU to reflect on the possibility to require that member states create registers and that later on these national registers be interconnected. Why is that? Well, we thought it would be too ambitious and also probably too invasive to have a European register, because registers are simply the end result of a long process whereby notaries deal with successions, and that process is anchored in a national tradition. So putting on top of that, those national processes, a uniform European register would probably not be the best idea. So we have a recommendation to invite member states to set up registers and work on the interconnection. I would say another benefit of this having those registers would be probably to strengthen the effects of the ECS. ECS are meant to be used by the heirs, the legatees, when they deal with banks, insurance companies, any other third parties. If we have national registers in member states, and if these registers are interconnected, we could also imagine providing that some third parties could have access to some of the information included in the register, and that would, I believe, help those third parties accepting the effect of the ECS. So that's the first recommendation on a possible evolution, which would go into the direction of creating national registers. Another recommendation deals with what appears to be a detail, but as you know, the devil is in the detail, and as practitioners know, it's one thing to have general principles, but in reality, in cases and in matters you're dealing with, sometimes you spend more time trying to solve a small detail than a general principle. The MAPE project has confirmed what we felt intuitively, and that is that there is some frustration with the requirement of translating the ECS. We found out that very often when an ECS is issued in member state A and used in member state B will require a translation. In fact, we found even worse that in some member states, this is limited and exceptional, but it does happen in some member states, there is even a request that the ECS be legalized or apostilled. which should not be requested. But anyhow, there are a lot of situations where there is a request that the ECS be translated. This could be very costly. It could be not proportionate to the amount at stake. You know, the current system of dynamic forms on the e-justice portal, which can be very useful, but it only provides a solution to some of the cases. Because as a notary in a member state, I can use the e-justice portal to create an ECS in my language and then print it out in another language. But this only goes some way if you know that in some member states, notaries are only allowed to work in their own language. And this is why we have made a recommendation in which we call for additional measures which could have alleviated the burden on citizens of having to pay for the translation. One possible solution for this would be to find inspiration in a system which already exists in another regulation. Some of you may know the Brussels 2B recast regulation, the divorce and parental responsibility regulation, which has been recasted. And there's an Article 91 in that regulation. And that Article 91 says that if you have a certificate, it may need to be translated, but the translation should be then limited to the content of the free text fields. Only the free text fields, not, let's say, the static content of the certificate. That could be a possibility for the Commission and the member states to improve the question of translation. We all know that we will have to keep translating some elements. We live in Europe. We have different languages, and that's very nice. So translation will never completely disappear, but if we can limit the extent of translation required and limit the cost, this would be very beneficial for citizens. I have two recommendations left. The one you see appearing on your screen also relates to what appears to be a detail, but again, this detail can be very embarrassing in some cases. It's a rather obvious point. You know that Article 70, third paragraph of the regulation says that certified copies may be issued for the ECS. The client will never get the ECS as such. The client, will get a certified copy, but the certified copy is only valid for 6 months. That's a limited duration, and that has created some frustration. And there's a general feeling, what we got from the field is a general feeling that the time period of 6 months is too short and that it should be revised. You may know that the regulation already provides a solution. You may extend the validity period. You may provide a longer period of validity when you issue a copy. But first, you can only do so in exceptional cases. And second, you need to justify it. So we found that this solution may not be the best one. If today you issue a copy of an ECS for a client, how do you know already that the time period of 6 months will be too short? You will only find out that it is too short when the client comes back to you after having tried to use the ECS and not having succeeded. Because, for example, banks are dragging their feet. So that's the current solution is not something efficient. On top of that, can you say beforehand when you issue a copy that the situation will be exceptional? Can you say, for example, that it's notorious that Belgian banks are very slow? I don't think this is a workable solution. So we are pleading for a longer period of validity. We have not decided how long the new period should be. And I would be interested to hear your views on that. Unfortunately, I will not be able to attend the rest of the meeting, but it'd be very interesting to hear your views on how long should the period be? Should it be 9 months, 12 months? Should it be longer? What do you think would be best suited to reflect the need of practice? A last recommendation on a very thorny issue. Can you access the real estate register of a member state with an ECS issued in another member state? You all know that from the very start of the discussions on the regulation, it was clear that this would be very difficult because on the one hand, you have the ambition of the ECS. The ECS is a tool which aims to make it easier for heirs and legatees to demonstrate their rights, and to make it smoother, easier, and more efficient. That's the aim of the ECS. And on the other hand, you've got the very legitimate concern of member states to keep control of their real estate registers, which we all know are quite different. And this contradiction between the ambition of the ECS, facilitate the life of citizens, and the legitimate concern of member states to keep control of their real estate registers, it's interesting that you can see it's built in the regulation itself. You can see the tension, you can see the contradiction in the regulation itself. What we found out with our discussions with notaries and the surveys we conducted is that we have a mixed picture. In some...
Yeah. Thank you, Patrick. Patrick, unfortunately, our time is running very quickly, but I have to stop you here at that
that's
point.
Fine.
I
apologize for being very long.
No. It was great, and you have presented really the hot topics which were dealt with in the MAPE project. We thank you so much. Patrick, the MAPE project is a great project. All the documentation of MAPE is in the QR code file available. You can see everything there. And we today, Patrick, we will build on that, what you have done with your team, with Professor Brigitta Lurga as well, and Professor Calais, I think, from France. We build on that, and we will keep you, of course, in the loop on what we are here developing also today.